Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing great. Today, we've got some fresh Counter-Strike 2 patch notes to talk about, and this one dropped on October 30th. I've been going through all the changes in detail, and while it might not look huge on the surface, there's actually a lot of small improvements tucked into this update that make a real difference once you start playing. So, let's break this down properly and talk about what Valve has done with this latest update, why it matters, and how it's going to change your experience in CS2. Now, first things first, this update is all about fine-tuning the feel of the game. Valve's clearly listening to community feedback, and one of the biggest things they tackled this time is player movement prediction. Basically, when you bump into other players who are also moving, the game's prediction system used to feel a bit off. Sometimes your character would stutter, slide weirdly, or get stuck on someone in a way that didn't feel natural. It wasn't game-breaking, but it was definitely one of those things that made movement feel less consistent, especially when you were trying to take quick duels or rotate around teammates in tight spots. With this patch, Valve improved how movement prediction handles player collisions, and it feels noticeably smoother. It's one of those fixes that you don't necessarily see in a clip, but you feel it the moment you play. There's less of that rubber banding effect when two players brush against each other, and peeking or shoulder swapping feels a little more controlled. Another interesting tweak is to the scope sound for snipers. You know how when you zoomed in or out, the sound of scoping sometimes felt slightly delayed? It would play after a split second instead of syncing with your actual click, which could throw off timing for players who rely on sound cues. Valve adjusted that so now the scope in and scope out sound plays instantly for the player. It's a small quality of life change, but it actually helps in subtle ways. Think about quick scoping with the AWP or SSG. Now your audio feedback matches exactly what's happening on your screen, making it easier to get into that rhythm. Predictability and sound timing matters a ton in competitive shooters, and this kind of fix just makes the game feel tighter and more reactive overall. Moving on, Retakes mode got a bunch of love this time. For those who don't spend much time there, Retakes is basically that fast-paced mode where you jump straight into post-plant scenarios. It's one of the best ways to warm up, practice retaking sites, and sharpen your reaction times without having to play a full match. Valve updated how loadout cards work for that mode, and they finally added something players have been asking for. If you own both the M4A1S and M4A4, the loadout cards will now randomly offer either one. That's huge for variety. Before this, you were basically stuck with one weapon depending on your settings, but now it's random, which gives you more opportunities to practice with both rifles. Considering how split the community still is between those two guns, this feels like a perfect middle ground. They also tweaked some of the cards themselves, adding armor to several of them. The 4v3, 4 bad guys left, and blind fire cards now give you body armor. That's a meaningful change because one of the biggest frustrations in retakes mode was spawning without armor and instantly getting melted by the first burst of bullets. Having armor by default on more cards means you can actually take fights that feel closer to what you'd experience in a real competitive round. It keeps things fairer and more consistent across the board. On top of that, the blind fire card for the T side now includes dual Berettas. It's a nice little flavor touch, not a game changer, but it adds more weapon diversity and gives players a reason to practice with those guns a bit more. They can be surprisingly effective in close-range fights if you know how to use them. For the CT side, the enemy loadout card got a change, where the flashbang has been replaced with an HE grenade. This might sound minor, but it actually shifts the way some rounds play out. Having a nade instead of a flash changes your approach to clearing sights. Instead of trying to blind enemies as you push in, you can now use that HE to flush out common plant spots or chip away at low HP opponents behind cover. It's a subtle adjustment that makes retakes feel fresher and adds another small tactical layer. Now, one of the more under-the-radar fixes in this update is related to animations. Valve fixed idle animations for a few weapons, specifically the CZ75 Auto, SSG's 08, AUG, and Galil AR. If you've ever just stood still watching your weapon, you might have noticed that the animations didn't always look right or would glitch a bit during idle states. These fixes polished that up. More importantly, Valve improved animation fidelity during demo playback. That's great news for anyone who reviews their matches or makes content from replays. Demos should now show animations more accurately to what actually happened in-game, which is awesome for anyone who makes frag movies or analytical videos. It's just one of those behind-the-scenes improvements that shows Valve is paying attention not just to gameplay, but also to how the game is presented to spectators and creators. Of course, like every patch, this one also mentions general performance and stability improvements. Valve's usually pretty quiet about exactly what that means, but every small optimization counts. Over the last few months, we've seen steady gains in how CS2 runs. Fewer frame drops, smoother frame pacing, and better consistency even on mid-range hardware. These background tweaks are helping the game reach that level of polish CSGO had after years of updates. And while there's still more work to be done, especially with things like input latency and tick consistency, these ongoing patches are pushing the game in the right direction. If you've been playing CS2 regularly, you've probably noticed how much better the game feels now compared to launch. Valve's been steadily tackling those core systems: movement, hit registration, weapon balance, even small details like audio prediction. Each patch might seem small, but when you combine all these micro updates, it starts to feel like a whole new experience. This one, for example, really nails down responsiveness. Your character feels more connected to your inputs, collisions feel fairer, and the sound timing is just more cohesive. It's all those tiny moments, strafing behind a teammate, taking a peek, quick scoping someone, that now feels smoother and more reliable. Another thing worth mentioning is how Valve's approach to retakes in particular says a lot about their focus right now. They're clearly experimenting with ways to make the game more accessible and enjoyable, even for players who don't want to grind long competitive matches every time. Retakes is becoming this perfect middle ground between casual play and serious training. By refining loadouts and adding armor where it makes sense, they're ensuring every session feels balanced and rewarding. It's also a clever way to get players familiar with different guns. Since you never quite know whether you'll spawn with an A1S or an A4 now, you end up naturally practicing with both, which builds flexibility for full matches. Speaking of weapons, this change might also tell us something about how Valve is thinking about gun balance moving forward. The M4A1S versus M4A4 debate has been one of the longest running discussions in CS. Instead of outright buffing or nerfing one again, Valve's now finding ways to encourage both to coexist. Randomizing which one you get in retakes reinforces that idea. Both are viable tools, and the player base is learning to adapt depending on what's available. It's a clever, indirect way of balancing without touching stats. Let's also talk a bit more about that collision fix, because it's easy to underestimate how big of a deal that is. In a game as precise as Counter-Strike, even small prediction errors can have serious effects on movement and hit registration. When you're taking a peek or trying to trade, you want every motion to be perfectly synced with the server. If you collide with a moving player and your prediction hiccups, it throws off your timing, your crosshair placement, everything. Fixing that means gameplay now feels tighter, especially in those chaotic moments where multiple players are trying to enter a site or hold an angle. It's the kind of technical improvement that doesn't look flashy in patch notes, but improves the feel of the entire game. It's also interesting how Valve worded that change: improved player movement prediction when colliding with other moving players. That tells us they're still actively refining the subtick system. Remember, CS2 runs on a new system that updates player states more dynamically rather than in fixed tick intervals. Getting prediction right under that model is tricky, and these updates show Valve's continuing to calibrate it. Over time, we'll probably see more of these micro tweaks until the movement feels as clean as the old 128 tick servers, maybe even better. Overall, this patch feels like one of those foundational updates that quietly improve everything without drastically changing the meta. It's the kind of patch that makes you go, yeah, this just feels better, even if you can't quite point to why right away. The movement's smoother, sound feedback feels more accurate, retakes is more enjoyable, and animations look more polished.